Just taking a look at this, that's stunning to think that American families, this is, for so many of them, their biggest paycheck or biggest windfall that they see all year economically. And Steve's right. What concerns me about that is this is money that they are loaning to the government that they don't have themselves over the course of the year. It's not a great way to be managing your money.
That's exactly right. I mean, it's tax time, and if you think about it, some $500 billion are coming in and out of financial accounts at this time. Rough numbers, if the economy is 20 trillion, that's 2.5% of GDP is making its way in and out of financial accounts through refunds and tax payments. Steve put up some of these statistics, but just to put a fine tone on it, 78% of households will receive a tax refund, and the average is 6 weeks of take-home pay. That is a major financial event. For 29% of people, it is the single most important cash flow event. For 50% of people, that is more than all their cash balances in banks. So this is a big event. It's important to realize that for many people, this is not done by design. So 90% of their income is coming in the form of their typical take-home. 10% of their income is coming in the form of refunds. As you point out, that's a zero interest loan to the government. And the effect of this big cash flow event at this point in time is, in effect, a reset and a rebalance of family spending. It's a reset because we see that spending increases sharply immediately after. We have a 74% increase in spending. And that spending is higher over the course of the next 6 months. So 7% overall. It's a new reset in spending. But it's also a rebalancing because people spend their tax refund differently than they spend their general day-to-day spending. And so we see much more emphasis on durables. They're paying down credit card debt. They are just taking out more cash instead of buying services, non-durables, and food. And so to the extent that families are planning this and by design making these choices, we might not worry because we know many of them are just defaulting into the regular withholdings or getting advice that may or may not be fully suited to their financial situation. These represent resettings of a sort not in their power.
Deanna, first of all, I want to just thank you guys for making this information available. I know JPMorgan, I know Jamie Dimon is big behind this. Really and you know you get a call from me every couple months asking for it to be released every month.
It's nice to be back, Steve. Thank you.
Every month I want you to release this data because it's sometimes better than the retail sales, the lousy retail sales data we get from the census. That said, I want to ask you about the amount of refunds this year. They're running 5% below. Is that a meaningful number? Is it catch up? You were in the administration. You watched it. I know your data deals with the 15 to 17 data, but I know people were worried, and it was something of the timing with the earned income tax credit. Now that's been made. Are we pretty much on pace so that there probably won't be a big meaningful impact on the consumer this year?
Well, let's talk about a couple of things about it. One of the things that makes tax refunds so interesting for economic research is that there is a long period of time over which people get tax refunds. So they start getting tax refunds in February, but many won't get their tax refunds till April. That's often a function of when they file taxes. And we know that there are different people who file taxes early than people who file taxes late. By and large, the people who are owed more of the tax refund file taxes early. So that's the picture we see so far. I don't think we can fully answer your question until we see the full cycle of tax refunds, which won't end till April or so. Okay, so that's the first point. Okay. I think the second point is that so much of what we're observing is not necessarily the level of tax, but when the tax gets paid. And so the extent to which the withholdings were down, which we know they were, means more people are likely to get a lower refund. Now, that doesn't mean they're less income. It just meant they had more income over the course of the year. And because we know that they spend their tax refund differently than they spend their regular income, they may be in for a surprise in terms of that refrigerator that they might have bought, that TV that they were thinking of buying, but in fact have already spent the money and they're getting a lower refund. So I think those are the two things to watch.
One more thing I think is really interesting about this is that people don't change their behavior. They know the tax refund is coming, and they don't spend more, and they don't change their income afterwards. It's like it's coming. I'm just going to let it come. It's almost like, I guess the best way to put it is sort of a forced savings.
And I was coming to the same thing. What's the answer? Because I do remember doing this when I was younger too. And what's the answer to get people to have a forced savings account
Well,
or something that really...
I think for a lot of people, it is a forced saving account. I think the response is, yes, but that's a saving at 0%. If you were taking the exact same amount and putting it into a higher interest rate device, you would be gaining more from your savings. For other people, it's a concern that they may face a penalty or a fee if they run out of cash when they feel like they may have to have a tax payment. And so it's a little bit of a risk-averse thing. But it is also the fact that for a long time, withholdings were very conservative. And so unless people were opting into a different withholding rate, they would, in fact, be withholding more than they needed to. And a lot of preparers will do that also. They will withhold more than, or advise people to withhold more than necessary. So all of those things, I think, contribute to it. But I think there's a really important education to be had about households taking the reins of these decisions and managing their own cash flow and not having the government policy drive the cash flow as much.
But Barry has a question here, but I just want to make one observation, which is I don't know how much I would over withhold in order to avoid having to write a check to the government in April. So I think there's some amount
it's a risk analysis.
I just cannot stand that idea that I have to write a check.
So exactly, I think that's, and we hear that in surveys.
I will do dumb financial things during the year in order to avoid that.
It's risk analysis. What if I don't have the money because I've spent it?
So that could be. Barry, go ahead.
That's
Sorry.
the concern. And the other place we see where people are not always acting rationally is that right after the tax refund, part of what they will do is pay down credit card debt. That means they were incurring debt, even though in theory they had access to income that they were over withholding. And so we do think there's an opportunity to say better not be paying credit card debt. That has a very high interest rate associated with it usually, if you're going to just wait until tax time to repay that expensive debt. So there is more attention that families could pay to this dynamic, especially now in light of the new tax law, to make sure they're optimizing their cash flow, that they're really getting the benefit of their income when they want it and spending it on the things that they want and they need, not just when they have the money to do it. Steve, in a previous research, you might remember, we looked at this through the lens of healthcare spend. And we were quite concerned that what we saw is right after tax refund, just like so many other categories, healthcare spend spikes. 60% in that first week relative to a baseline. And when we looked at it closely, we learned that that was mostly care that people needed to get, not care that they were just paying for.
Hold on.
Deanna, you just hit on a topic and related to the question I wanted to ask, which is, number one, has this changed over time? Has this gone up? There's this entire mystery about why Q1 GDP has been decidedly weak that, the BEA has been trying to deal with. One of the potential answers was that because deductibles have gone up so much on healthcare plans, you were getting this big spend on healthcare in the fourth quarter, and then a slowdown in the first quarter because you had to meet the deductible. So what you might be observing is a little bit coincident to that other trend, right? Kaiser Foundation has shown that surge in those deductibles. But the real question is, has this gone up over time? And how big a deal is it? Does it potentially explain this, real mystery in GDP data where it's weak in the first quarter? Have you thought about that?
Well, I'll tell you, our data for now includes 2015, 2016, and 2017. So that's the window we have. And what we observe is significant stability in terms of how many people are getting refunds. For example, the same families that got refunds one year are likely to get refunds the next year. And so there's stability on that ground. I do agree that the work that we've done on out-of-pocket healthcare spend, so how much people are paying out of pocket for their healthcare, is typically large amounts, but that fit under the deductible. And so people will work to manage that. And if they feel that they're going to run out of time before, or they need to front load the deductible, we're pretty sure they're playing that game to some extent.